محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. ومتى توبع السيء الحفظ بمعتبر كأن يكون فوقه أو مثله لا دونه، وكذا المختلط الذي لم يتميز والمستور والإسناد المرسل، وكذا المدلس إذا لم يعرف المحذوف منه صار حديثهم حسنا لا لذاته، بل وصفه بذلك باعتبار المجموع من المتابع والمتابع، لأن كل واحد منهم احتمال أن تكون سيوبي، لأن كل in one نسخة it comes لأن مع كله. So although here in our نسخة it's لأن كله, but in some of the manuscripts it comes لأن مع كله. لأن كل واحد منهم احتمال أن تكون روايته صوابا أو غير صواب على حد سواء، فإذا جاءت من المعتبرين رواية موافقة لأحدهم رجح أحد الجانبين من الاحتمالين المذكورين، ودل ذلك على أن الحديث محفوظ، فارتقى من درجة التوقف إلى درجة القبول، ومع ارتقائه إلى درجة القبول فهو منحط عن رتبة الحسن لذاته، وربما توقف بعضهم عن إطلاق اسم الحسن عليه، وقد انقضى ما يتعلق بالمتن من حيث القبول والرد. Earlier, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah identified 4 types of acceptable narrations. So he explained 3 of them, and that was Sahih li dhatihi, Sahih li ghayrihi, and Hasan li dhatihi. And very briefly, he touched on the 4th, and that was Hasan li ghayrihi. He then went on to discuss the rejected narrations and explain the various reasons which cause a narration to be rejected. He first discussed the defects in the chain, and thereafter he elaborated on the flaws of the narrator. So first he explained saqtun fil isnad, and thereafter he explained ta'anun fil ruwah, that the missing link in the chain or the blemish on the narrator. In the middle of all of this, he mentioned about weakness which comes about because of shuzuz and ilal, so 2 conditions of sahih which if they are not fulfilled. He now explains whether these rejected narrations can ever be upgraded to the level of maqbool. And this here is what is known as Hasan li ghayrihi. So there was a huge gap between the first 3 views of maqbool and this 4th type. And the reason is because to understand Hasan li ghayrihi, one first needs to understand mardud. And therefore Ibn Hajar rahimahullah felt it's wise to first explain about mardud and thereafter to discuss Hasan li ghayrihi. So when looking at the order, the arrangement and the sequence of the book, some might feel that it is perfect for this chapter to be here, because obviously now that we understand what's mardud, we can understand how it can, which types of mardud can be upgraded. So all the terms which will be discussed have now been clearly defined, and therefore there is no better place for this chapter. However, others feel that it would have been better if this chapter was immediately after Hasan li dhatihi. And hence you find Ibn al-Hanbali rahimahullah, for example, in Qafw al-Athar, he changed the order of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah. So you are summarizing Nuzha an-Naḍar, and when you have to summarize this chapter, then he summarized it after the chapter of Hasan li dhatihi. So he said, وَأَمَّا الْحَسَنْ لِغَيْرِهِ فَهُوَ الْوَاحِدُ الَّذِي يَرْوِيهِ مَنْ يَكُونَ سَيِّئَ الْحِفْظِ وَلَوْ مُخْتَلِطًا لَمْ يَتَمَيَّزْ ما حدث به قبل الاختلاط، أو يكون مستورا أو مرسلا لحديثه أو مدلسا في روايته من غير معرفة المحذوف فيهما، فيتابع أيا كان منهم من هو مثله أو فوقه في الدرجة من السند، وستعرف المتابعة. So you can see even before explaining متابعة, at that time he explained Hasan li ghayrihi. So he changed the order. So this shows that the order of a book is something which is nisbi, it's a relative. Different people will give preference to different ways in how the order should be, and therefore the same applies to the books which Ibn Hajar rahimahullah criticized in the beginning. Some might feel that those books are in a better order, whereas Ibn Hajar rahimahullah criticized them. This here is an important chapter, since we have a great group of students now in today's times who deny the concept of Hasan li ghayrihi. They think that a weak narration can never be accepted, even if there are other weak narrations which can be put together to support each other. So due to that, they regard it as permissible to listen to music, and they just believe in the Mahdi. So you may refer to the book Al-Qawl al-Hasan fi Kashf al-Shubuhat hawla al-Ihtijaj bil-Hadith al-Hasan of Sheikh Ahmad ibn Abil Aynain. He has a lot of details on the Siyam. Earlier in this book, like we said, that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah explained those three types, and then he touched on Hasan li Gharihi. So there he said on page 58, وَإِنْ قَامَتْ قَرِينَةٌ ترجح جانب قبول ما يتوقف فيه فهو الحسن أيضا لكن لا لذاته. This is how he explained it there. So here he is now going to go into more details about it. So he now explains that if a person with a weak memory or someone who is unknown, he mentions 5 different types of, the one is a person with with a weak memory, and the second is a person who is majhulul hal. If such people, if they have to narrate a hadith, thereafter you have another person who also has a weak memory, or maybe he is also majhulul hal, so they are equal. Then if he has to narrate the same narration, then each one will strengthen the other. That means that individually both of these will be weak, but when you put them together, then they will become Hasan li Gharihi. So first to go through the text of Nukhbatul Fikr, because the presentation in Nuzha an-Naḍar has a lot of going off route. So in Nukhbatul Fikr it says وَمَتَى تُوبِعَ سَيِّئُ الْحِفْظِ بِمُعْتَبَرٍ وَكَذَا الْمَسْطُورُ وَالْمُرْسَلُ وَالْمُدَلَّسُ صَارَ حَدِيثُهُم حَسَنًا لَا لِذَاتِهِ بَلْ بِاعْتِبَارِ الْمَجْمُوعِ. It says that when you have a person who has a weak memory, or someone who was mastur, now we done all of this here, or if you have a person who made irsal of a narration, or if you have someone who made the least of a narration, then if they have support, that means with another person who is equal to them, if they also narrated the hadith, then the combination will become Hasan li that, it will become Hasan, but it won't be Hasan li dhatihi. Rather, it's only becoming Hasan because of the support. So now to go through the text here in Nuzha an-Naḍar, he says, وَمَتَى تُوبِعَ السَّيِّئُ الْحِفْظِ. So he says that when a person with a weak memory has a mutaba'ah, that means there's someone else who is narrating. And he mentions weak memory here in a broad and general sense, which means it will incorporate the one whose a weak memory was temporary and a person who naturally had a permanent weak memory. سواء في ذلك الملازم والطارئ الذي لم يتميز. So in the previous chapter we done that sometimes a person maybe because of a particular stage in his life or because of some episode in his life for a short duration he lost his memory. And there are others who permanently they had a weak memory. This incorporates both. So any person in the state of having a weak memory. Now here the issue is only with the memory. There is no problem at all with the person's integrity. And to highlight this, Allama Munawi rahimahullah added 2 qualities, and he said as-saduqul amin. So وَمَتَى تُوبِعَ السَّيِّئُ الْحِفْظِ الصَّدُوقُ الْأَمِينُ. That means that the person is integrity is perfect, is flawless, he is very truthful, he is trustworthy. The only defect that he has is in the memory. So here when we talk about weak memory, now when we go through the 10 stages of ta'an, then we done weak memory as the last stage, the last category. That means in the last lesson we done it, the last category was that person who has a weak memory. But then we also done the third category, it's referring to a person of fuhshul ghala, that he makes a lot of mistakes. And the reason why a person would make a lot of mistakes is because of a weak memory. So the question now comes about that when Ibn Hajar is talking about weak memory here, then who is he referring to? Is he referring to this last category, or is he referring to that third category? So Mullah al-Qari doubts whether he intends the 10th category of Ashab al-Ta'an, or he is referring to the third category. However, if you read Sheikh Ibrahim Lahim, he is certain that Ibn Hajar is referring to the third category and not to the last category. And this here is because we find that the Mutaqaddimun, they would accept from those who are from previous categories. That means between the third and the 10th category. So therefore, here when he's referring to Sayyi'ul Hifz, he is referring to someone who is Fuhshul Ghala. So he says that such a person with a weak memory, he has a mutaba'a bimu'tabarin. He says, but it is necessary that the supporting chain, that mutaba'a, should be valid. Now this is how the word which is used in Nukhbatul Fikr. So now Ibn Hajar rahimullah explains how should the supporting chain be valid. So he says, كَأَيْ يَكُونَ فَوْقَهُ, that it should either be higher than it. This is how you translate it, كَأَيْ يَكُونَ فَوْقَهُ, it should either be higher than it. Now this refers to the rank. So therefore we could even translate it as it could even be better than him. Allama Qasim rahimahullah, he assumed that this refers to the link. So that means كَأَيْ يَكُونَ فَوْقَهُ means that he should have a he should have support in a higher link. That means in the sanad, there should be another sanad. And if he is, say, maybe in the year 150 Hijri, for example, then there should be a tabi'i, so someone who is higher in the link, who is also supporting him. So another sanad is brought, and in that second sanad, the support for him comes from the tabi'i, so someone higher up in the sanad. This is what Allama Qasim rahimahullah understood. He said, Al-murad biqawlihi fawqahu aw mithlahu, ay fi darajati min as-sanad. That means it should be above him, a link above him in the sanad. La fi sifa. He's not talking about sifa. So this is, Allama Qasim intends that there should be support in the higher links of the sanad. However, this here is clearly not correct. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah intends the rank of the narrator. Hence we find that Allama al-Qani refuted this. Likewise, Mullah al-Qari rahimahullah, he remarked on this comment of Allama Qasim rahimahullah, وَقَدْ تَقَدَّمَ مَعْنَى الْإِعْتِبَارِ وَمَا يَتَعَلَّقُ بِهِ وَالظَّاهِرُ أَنَّ الْمُرَادِ بِالْفَوْقِيَّةِ وَالْمِثْلِيَّةِ هُنَا فِي الصِّفَةِ لَا فِي السَّنَدِ. He's saying that the meaning is in the sifa. So therefore we say you can translate it as someone better than him. If he has a weak memory, then someone with a better memory. So this is the meaning of fawqiyya. So كَأَيْ يَكُونَ فَوْقَهُ, someone who is better than him. If we have to say كَأَيْ يَكُونَ فَوْقَهُ, someone who is above him, then there is scope for what Allama Qasim said, that the mutaba'a, the support for him is in another sanad, and the support is at a higher link. So Mullah al-Qari says, لأنه على تقدير ما يقوله التلميذ لا يصح كلام الشيخ. He's saying that if you have to take it like what Allama Qasim is saying, then this whole statement of Ibn Hajar rahmallah even does not make sense. So now when we say that كَأَيْ يَكُونَ فَوْقَهُ, it refers to be better. Now we said the weak memory could either refer to the third category from the Asbab al-Tu'an, or it could refer to the last category. So if we assume that Sayyi'ul Hifz here refers to that last category, which we discussed last week, then if someone from this last category, which had the lowest amount of weakness, because you remember that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah said that he's starting these categories with the weakness which is extremely severe, and therefore he started with Kizbul Rawi and the Tuhmatul Kizb, etc. So now, by the time we came to the last category, the weakness was extremely minimal. So if we assume that weak memory refers to this person from the 10th category, with someone of that weak, minimal amount of weakness, then if you have someone who is higher than him and someone who is better than him, then his narration will be upgraded. So in this case, the other narration will be sahih, isn't? Because here, after the 10th category, in the previous section where Ibn Hajar said, ثُمَّ سَيِّئُ الْحِفْظِ وَهُوَ السَّبَبُ الْعَاشِرِ مِنْ أَصْحَابِ التَّعْنِ. After that, the category above that is Hasan. And after that, it's Sahih. So this here is ضعف اليسير, extremely minimal amount of weakness. So for anyone who is better than this year, who is better than this 10th category of Su'ul Hifz, then he is definitely in the category of Hasan or Sahih. So that means the supporting sanad is Hasan or the supporting sanad is Sahih. So this is if we assume that weak memory refers to the last category of ta'an. If we regard weak memory to be the third category, then even if the stronger narration is still weak, because it could be from the fifth category, then both narrations independently will be weak, but when we combine them together, they will become Hasan. So either the parallel narration is stronger, or mithlahu, or maybe it's equal to it. So the narration is transmitted with two chains, and in both chains there are narrators with weak memories. Or maybe in one chain there's someone who has a weak memory, and in the other chain there is someone who is majhulul hal, mastur. So in this case here, each narration independently will have minimal weakness, but put together they strengthen each other, and therefore when looking at them as a whole, then they become Hasan. So the narration could either be stronger or equal. La dunahu, it cannot be inferior to it. So it cannot be from a lower category. A narration cannot be slightly weak and the other narration severely weak. To give an example of this here, Allama Munawi rahimahullah, he offers the example of a narration in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, which goes via Asim ibn Ubaidullah, who narrates from Abdullah ibn Amir ibn Rabi'ah, who narrates from his father, that أن امرأة من بني فزارة تزوجت على نعلين. She got married and took as dowry a pair of shoes. فقال المصطفى صلى الله عليه وسلم أرضيت من نفسك ومالك بنعلين. Are you happy to take this year in exchange of yourself a pair of shoes? And she said yes. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam permitted the marriage. So Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah first explains that وَفِي الْبَابِ عَنْ عُمَرَ وَأَبِي هُرَيْرَ وَعَائِشَةَ. So he says فَعَاسِمْ ضَعِيفٌ لِسُوءِ حِفْظِهِ. But Asim is weak because he has a weak memory. But yet Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah graded this here as Hasan. And the reason why he graded it as Hasan is because there are others who, because there was support for Asim. So that's the first, that the person has a weak memory. The second type of weakness which a person could have, and because of this weakness the narration could still be upgraded, is وَكَذَا الْمُخْتَلِطُ الَّذِي لَمْ يَتَمَيَّزْ. So a mukhtalit is a person who had a good memory or he had good eyesight, but then he lost his memory. So we don't know that this narrator who is narrating from him, whether he heard this narration from him before he started to lose his memory, or whether he heard this narration after he lost his memory. So therefore we have to make tawaqquf. That's what Ibn Hajar rahimahullah explained in the previous lesson. He said, وَإِذَا لَمْ يَتَمَيَّزْ تُوَقَّفَ فِيهِ. When we cannot differentiate when the person heard, then we will make tawaqquf. So when we are making tawaqquf, but now you have another person who is also narrating from the same sheikh, or maybe from another sheikh who also had the same problem, who also lost his memory, and the exact same problem is found, that we cannot differentiate whether this person heard from him before he lost his memory or after he lost his memory, or whether he heard from him before he lost his eyesight or after he lost his eyesight. So then this narration will be strengthened by each other. Each one can strengthen the other. Or maybe you have someone who is narrating a particular narration, and he's narrating it from his sheikh who started to lose his memory, and we don't know whether he heard this narration before the sheikh lost his memory or after. So that's the one narration, and the other narration is someone who has a weak memory. So each one will strengthen the other. So that's the second group which Ibn Hajar mentions. Then the third is wal masturu, that a person is mastur. So we done the meaning of mastur according to Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, that it is majhulul ahal. So in rawa anhu thnani fasa'idan wa lam yuwathaq fahuwa majhulul hal wa huwa al-mastur. That he has two students who narrate from him, but no one has ever approved of him. So you have a narrator like that who is narrating a narration, and then you have someone who's mukhtalit also narrating it, or someone who has su'ul hifz, or you have two people who are mastur narrating a narration. Then each one individually is weak, but put together they strengthen each other and raise to the status of Hasan. So this here is the next category. And then the category after that is wal isnadul mursal, is that if the sanad is mursal. So if the sanad is mursal, according to Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, because being a Shafi'i, he takes it that it's necessary for there to be a mutaba'ah. And then only you can accept it. But others will feel that you can accept it independently. Likewise, وَكَذَا الْمُدَلَّسِ. So the point is that here the weakness cannot be extremely severe. It basically must just be minimal weakness, then you can accept it. If it's extremely severe weakness, then you cannot accept it. So when you look at these here also in tadlis, for example, a person, if he has to, generally, if his practice is that he leaves out the names of those who are kadhab, etc., then obviously his tadlis narration is going to be extremely weak. So in that case, it can never be strengthened. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah says with regards to a mursal and a mudallis, so that's how you can read it as mursil or mudallis, but you can see Shaykh Nuruddin Mullah al-Qari explains how you can read it as both, but Shaykh Nuruddin preferred to put the fatha, so to read it as mursal and mudallas. So then he explains that إِذَا لَمْ يُعْرَفِ الْمَحْذُوفُ مِنْهُ, that this is only if we don't know who was dropped off. So the person who was making irsal, if we know that he left out a kadhab, or the person who was camouflaging or even omitting, concealing the name of his sheikh, if he is, if it's clear, if we come to know that he was doing for someone who used to generally speak lies, then obviously we cannot accept that narration. So, إِذَا لَمْ يُعْرَفِ الْمَحْذُوفُ مِنْهُمْ. So these are 5 types which Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned here in Nuzha an-Naḍar. In his Nukat, he mentioned these same 5 types. So commenting on the words of Allama Ibn Salah rahimahullah and on the practice of Imam Tirmidhi, Ibn Hajar rahmallah said, وَلَيْسَ هُوَ فِي التَّحْقِيقِ عند الترمذي مقصورا على رواية المستور بل يشترك معه الضعيف بسبب سوء الحفظ. That's the first. والموصوف بالغلط والخطأ وحديث المختلط بعد اختلاطه والمدلس إذا عنعنه وما في إسناده انقطاع خفيف. So basically all types of minimal weakness, can be strengthened. So then he says, if you have narrations like these, and these narrations have support, then صار حديثهم. So here he says صار حديثهم. Allama Qasim rahimahullah commented that it would be better if he rather said صار الحديث. He said الأولى أن يقول صار الحديث لأن الضمير للمختلط والمستور والإسناد, because the ضمير, if صار حديثهم, it goes to the word sanad as well, because mursal and mudallas. So if you're reading it as لم يتميز والمستور والإسناد المرسل, so you can see, you're reading it وكذا المدلس, then you cannot say حديثهم. So therefore, Allama Qasim said that instead of putting the dhamir at the end of the word hadith, rather you put an alif lam before the word, and in that case it will be correct. So he said فعلم ما قال يكون على وجه التغليب أو تقدير مضاف وعلى ما قلت لا يحتاج لذلك والله سبحانه وتعالى أعلم. So he says صار حديثهم حسنا, the narrations will become حسنا. Mullah al-Qari says أي لغيره, it means it becomes حسن لغيره, and therefore Allama Ibn Hajar says لا لذاته, it will be حسن but it will not be حسن لذاته, it will be حسن لغيره. So Allama Munawi said يعني اعتذر بما رووه وقوي وخرج عن كونه ضعيفا إلى كونه حسنا لغيره, that now these narrations each strengthened the other, so now they will no more be weak, rather they will be hasan, but they will be hasan li-ghayrihi. So the point here is that there is no defamation because of adalah. It's rather because of either dhabt or either a missing link. If it is because of adalah, then that is generally severe weakness. So if a person is a liar or if he's a sinner, then his narration will never be strengthened up to Hasan just with another similar report. There is that whole ikhtilaf according to Ulama Baqa'i rahimahullah and Ulama Suyuti rahimahullah, etc., which we explained in detail, that whether they upgraded to just minimal du'af, and thereafter if you have another one, another narration which has minimal du'af, then all together, so that one narration which has minimal du'af and this bundle of narrations which have a severe du'af, all of them will then be upgraded to a Hasan. But independently, those narrations cannot be without another narration which has minimal weakness. They cannot come to Hasan li ghayrihi. So therefore, Imam Munawi rahimahullah said, أما الضعيف لفسق راوي أو كذبه فلا يؤثر فيه متابعة. If a person is a fasiq, he's a great sinner, or he's a liar, then even if there is a mutaba'ah, ولا موافقة إذا كان الآخر مثله. Likewise, even if it agrees with the narration of others, it has absolutely no worth and value. لقوة الضعف, because of the severity of the weakness. وتقاعد هذا الجابر. نعم يرتقي بمجموع طرقه عن كونه منكرا أو لا أصل له كما قال المؤلف. قال بل ربما كثرت الطرق حتى أوصلته إلى درجة المستور, and the discussion we discussed. So Ulama Ibn al-Hammami also mentions the same thing in his Tahrir. حديث الضعيف بالفسق لا يرتقي بتعدد الطرق إلى الحجة وبغيره مع العدالة يرتقي. So this is that the weakness mustn't be extreme weakness, it must just be a minimal weakness. So he's saying that بل وصفه بذلك باعتبار المجموع من المتابع والمتابع, that it's only called Hasan when it's combined. That means it's the combination of both narrations, then only it could be considered as a Hasan narration. Independently, they do not have any strength, and therefore they will be regarded as weak. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah outlined 5 types in this sentence. Now he says, لأن كل واحد منهم احتمال أن تكون روايته صوابا أو غير صواب على حد سواء. From these 5 examples which he has given, each one, we cannot with absolute conviction say that the person is making a mistake or the person is incorrect. Rather, there is a chance that maybe he's correct, or that there is a chance that he is incorrect. And therefore, the weakness is either very minimal, or we are making tawakkuf on this here. That each report has an equal chance of being correct or incorrect. That when a person, if he has a slightly weak memory, if he comes and tells you something, there is no guarantee that he is definitely making a mistake. If a person with a weak, or else we won't be able to trust anyone in our times. If someone has to come and tell you something which took place at your house this morning, you won't be able to trust him because you'll say he has a weak memory. So, the same applies in Ḥadīth, that there is a great chance that he might be, maybe he has a weak memory, but maybe in this year he is correct. So now, فَإِذَا جَاءَتْ مِنَ الْمُعْتَبِرِينَ رِوَايَةً مُوَافَقَةً لِأَحَدٍ him. So now when we find another report which confirms what his report, then now we can become more convinced to say that this person is actually correct in what he narrated. So it tips the scales, that now we begin to favor his narration and we become inclined towards agreeing with him and understanding that he did not make a mistake. وَدَلَّ ذَلِكَ عَلَىٰ أَنَّ الْحَدِيث مَحْفُوظ. So that shows that the narration will be mahfuz. فَارْتَقَى مِنْ دَرَجَةِ التَّوَقُّفِ إِلَى دَرَجَةِ الْقَبُولِ. So therefore it will increase from just being a tawaqquf, and that we will now accept it, and therefore it becomes Hasan li ghayrihi. In his book Al-As'ilatul Fa'iqa bil-Ajwabatul La'iqa, Ibn Hajar explains here, he says, لأن المستور مثلا حيث يروي, when a mastur, so this person here, we don't know whether he's reliable or not reliable. 2 people narrated from him. So you have a person, 2 people narrated from him. And he narrates, يحتمل أن يكون ضبط المروي. We don't know anything about him. Maybe he does have a good memory. So maybe he remembered correctly. ويحتمل أن لا يكون ضبطه. Or maybe he did not remember correctly. فإذا ورد مثل ما رواه أو معناه من وجه آخر, if the exact same report or a similar report is narrated through another tariq, غلب على الظن أنه ضبطه. Now we become more inclined to accepting his report. But now Ibn Hajar rahimahullah explains that وَمَعَ ارْتِقَائِهِ إِلَى دَرَجَةِ الْقَبُولِ فَهُوَ مُنْحَطٌ عَنْ رُتْبَةِ الْحَسَنِ لِذَاتِهِ. In spite of being raised, it will still be inferior to Hasan lidatihi. So therefore, at the time of contradiction, preference will be given to Hasan lidatihi, as Ibn Hajar explained in his Nukat. In his Nukat, he explained that all of these here have different statuses. وَتَظْهَرُ فَائِدَةُ ذَلِكَ عِنْدَ التَّعَارُضِ. And he says, وَرُبَّمَا تَوَقَّفَ بَعْضُهُمْ عَنْ إِطْلَاقِ اسم الحسن عَلَيْهِ. Some hesitated and had reservations in using the word Hasan, because in the lessons of Muqaddam ibn Salah we done that before, in the earlier days, the earlier scholars didn't use the term Hasan. So therefore, from they would just use the word da'if, and therefore latter day scholars then also would have the same reservations. Mullah al-Qari explains لأنه ليس بحسن حقيقة ولأن الحسن إذا أطلق ينصرف إلى الحسن لذاته ولأنه يلزم من إطلاق الحسن عليه الاحتجاج به عند الفقهاء وهو محل خلاف. وقد انقضى ما يتعلق بالمتن من حيث القبول والرد. So he says now until here, whatever deals with the matn, with the text, has been completed. So, but interestingly, when you look at it, most of what we discussed was with regards to the sanad. Where he did discuss about the text, it was just in passing. For example, under the chapters of Muharraf and Musahaf, etc. It was all in passing. Mostly discussed about the chain, and that is because this whole science of ulum al-hadith deals with the chain. Inshallah, we'll continue from here on Saturday. Until then, jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.